Thank you for letting us do this interview today. I really appreciate it. Why don't you introduce yourself?
I'm Josh Leffingwell. I'm the Communications Director at the West Michigan Environmental Action Council.
Okay, and I'm just going to ask you a couple of questions. How long have you lived in Grand Rapids?
Lived inside Grand Rapids for about 4 years, but
Okay.
I've been living in the Grand Rapids area for 13.
13 years. Okay, so do you live in like a suburb out of Grand Rapids?
Yeah, I lived in Wyoming and then in Standale.
Okay. Are you a Green Valley graduate?
And Grand Valley graduate.
Awesome. Okay. So what I'm going to be asking you today is, what do you think the most pressing social issue in Grand Rapids or even West Michigan, and what can be done about it?
Okay.
Okay. And what are your thoughts on that?
In my opinion, the most pressing social issue is the disparities between income and opportunity between blacks and whites in Grand Rapids.
Okay.
And specifically the lack of opportunity and the fact that we continue to get on lists with being one of the best cities in the country, and at the same time that we're getting on lists for predominantly affluent things, we continue to also get on lists for being a city with the biggest disparity between black and white housing recovery, one of the worst cities for African Americans economically, get on the list for one of the highest infant mortality rates for black women, and as far as like arrest rates, we continue to see that black people are arrested at 6 times the rate of white people in Michigan and Grand Rapids. So like we continue to see like all of these disparities continuing to grow, even though we keep getting on lists for being such a great place for predominantly fluent white people to live.
Okay. So when we get on these lists, what kind of list do we get? I know like we get best beer city USA and everything
Like best
that.
beer city, best place to raise a family, those types of things.
So
But again, we see the disparities between like the schools that are chosen for the best places to raise a family are typically like Ottawa Hills and some of the other schools that are in the outlying areas, closer to East Grand Rapids, and less are inner city schools like City High or Union.
So there's a lot of favoritism towards white people than there is towards African American community and everything. Do you think that there is like for other minorities like Asian people and Hispanics?
It's predominantly, so like when we look at the housing market, we know that we don't have the same disparities in the Asian community, although I do think that their infant mortality rate is a little bit higher than whites.
Okay.
But the Latino population is seeing a similar thing. Not at the same rate as white people. Their arrest rates are much lower than African Americans. We also see the same with like infant mortality. They did have the same issues though with the housing market, where we've seen that they have the same one, not just not being able to get housing, but also the fact that when their homes are foreclosed upon, the banks aren't taking care of those homes in the same way as they do in affluent neighborhoods. So they let those properties stay boarded up, they don't cut the grass, they don't paint the houses or anything like that like they do in affluent neighborhoods.
Okay.
Wells Fargo is in a big settlement with Grand Rapids for something like that.
What is Wells Fargo? I'm not familiar.
Wells Fargo, it's a bank that does like home lending,
Okay.
and they foreclose upon homes in predominantly African American communities, specifically in the 49507 area code, or zip code. They let those just stay in bad shape. Where in white neighborhoods they would fix them up, paint them, cut the grass on a regular basis, that kind of stuff.
Okay. So when there's these disparities, do you think that they are specifically targeting African Americans, like if they like see that they struggle, or do you think that the opportunities that African Americans have like not been giving is affecting them?
So I think it's a little bit of both. Like when we look at the arrest rates, we see so at a city commission meeting just a couple of months ago, the police chief was there, and he said that when they were talking about some of the reform that they're going to be making to the way that the police work in the community, they talked about body cams. They're going to be adding body cams. They're going to be doing all these things. They're going to be doing more community policing and like a broad scope of different things. But when they asked him whether he saw that there were racial disparities in arrest rates, he said that he doesn't think that there are. When the facts show that they're getting African Americans are being locked up 200 African American people per 1,000 versus 30 for white people. And so the fact that he doesn't think that there's disparity shows that he either thinks that blacks are committing that much more crime in the city than whites, or he is lying. Like the fact that we don't have, I think part of it is the fact that we don't have honesty around a lot of these conversations is making it so that we aren't tackling these issues head on. We're looking at them and saying, well, we'll do some small reforms, but even still when we make these reforms, we're still making reforms at a racist level. We're still making it with the assumption that blacks are committing more crimes.
Okay.
We're still making these reforms with these understandings that that the reason why we have the issues with the way that banks take care of housing in poor black neighborhoods is because, well, the black people aren't calling the banks as much because they're afraid, or they don't have a relationship with banks in the same way that white people do. And those are fine. Those are likely accurate assumptions, but that still doesn't get at systematic issues that the fact that that they don't have the same relationship with banks, because we've seen like Mercantile Bank hasn't given a black business a loan since 2010. Like that, and they've given white business owners loans hundreds of times since then. So I think we continue to see that all of these things systematically just build up to cause these larger problems.
No, for sure. Do you think that his ethnicity had something to do with the way he reacted when you asked him about disparities and everything to the commissioner?
So the police chief, it was asked a couple times, and it was asked by reporters that question, but I think it was mostly just him kind of covering himself and covering his team. I mean, it's his prerogative to make sure that the police and the community look good, but the fact that he won't answer those questions in an honest way is troubling to the rest of the community, not just to police officers.
Okay, that makes sense. So with all these disparities between the African American community and the white community in Grand Rapids, what do you think we could do about it to change it?
So I think part of it is going to be, when we talk about opportunity, I think a lot of it is access.
Okay.
So offering access to capital, so that we have one of the lowest entrepreneurship rates in young black people in the country. We have a very low entrepreneurship rate, and so and part of it is because they don't have access to capital. They can't get funding in order to start these small businesses. And if we're able to begin fostering this opportunity, fostering this black middle class in Grand Rapids, we might see that we could grow that middle class, and we could see some of these disparities begin to break down. I think what we also need to do is begin looking internally and looking and saying, all right, there are these disparities, how can we solve them? Instead of looking at these disparities and saying, well, they exist for a number of reasons, and they're too big for us to handle. We're starting to see that. I think while I'm critical of the way that the police chief handles a lot of the way that he handles talking about the disparities in arrest rates, I am encouraged that he's willing to look at ways to reform the police department, and we are beginning to see folks like Wells Fargo realize that they did make mistakes. It took a Supreme Court ruling for them to realize that they made mistakes, but now they are beginning to invest properly, and so I think that part of it is beginning to happen, but it takes taking a lot of dialogue, it's taking a lot of folks to push really hard in order for any of this to actually happen.
Okay, so it's a good thing that even though people have made mistakes, the chief commissioner has is kind of covering himself and his company and everything, and then Wells Fargo has also like been pushing it. So it doesn't seem like there's no hope for Grand Rapids. It seems like they are working on things, which is awesome.
Yeah, we're starting to. But the issue is that we continue to see that the city is investing more in new people coming into the city than they are in the people who have lived here for years. And so if we can begin investing again in the people who live here, have lived here for years, not the millennials that everyone is trying to gain, and to look at raising up the people who have been living here for years, the populations that have been making Grand Rapids the Grand Rapids that it is for the past 50 years, through the decline of the white flight and through all this. We need to begin investing in them to make sure that we can raise up that standard of living for them.
Yeah, I think that's called like gentrification. I had that in another class, and we were focusing on a different minority of homeless people and everything, and they were just talking about how we're focusing on bringing more people in, like more money in, but then we're losing that aspect of like what Grand Rapids like really was and the original people who are here, and it's not fair to people just to push them out just because they're having a struggle.
Yeah, we're beginning to see the effects of gentrification in Grand Rapids, but we also have seen that when African American and Latino people become affluent in Grand Rapids, their first move, because we haven't invested in those communities, is to get out of Grand Rapids, to go to predominantly African Americans move to Kentwood, predominantly Latino populations are moving to like South Wyoming or North Wyoming.
Okay.
And they're not saying, oh well, we need to stay in Grand Rapids. They're saying we got to get that out. We need to create this. We need to build a community where we can succeed, and they're not seeing that in Grand Rapids, and that's part of the problem.
Yeah, it's a huge problem if we want to keep Grand Rapids diverse and everything. If we're not treating them right, then we're gonna lose them.
Yeah.
That's a big issue. However, we're running out of time. Okay, thank you so much for letting me interview today. I really appreciate it.
For sure.
Okay, peace out.